Today we got a new trailer for Lanterns, and even as somebody who has really enjoyed the trailers that we have gotten so far up to this point, today's new trailer was by far and away the best for the show yet, and I cannot lie, my expectations and hopes for the show are through the roof. Of course, we are just talking about trailers, so we have no idea what the actual quality of the show will be yet. It could absolutely suck, but my hype is reaching levels that I have not yet felt for a DCU project. Yes, that includes Superman. Ever since the announcement of this show, there has been so much worry about whether or not Lanterns would truly feel like a Green Lantern project inspired by the comics, as so much of the early talk about the show was centered around its true detective inspiration and the fact that it would likely have budget constraints being on TV. On top of that, it felt like a lot of the talk was about how the show would be a bit more grounded, as we were dealing with a murder mystery in the Midwest instead of some sci-fi epic that spanned across the greater DC cosmos. And even though we still don't know all there is to know about Lanterns, as the show is not yet out, one thing that I think is clear from this most recent trailer is the fact that even though there are certainly some more grounded elements, this show is full of things ripped right out of what you would come to expect from a Green Lantern story in the comics. There are unique planets, awesome constructs, and extraterrestrial villains, all major staples of what makes Green Lantern comics so epic and fun to read, and I really do think this show could end up being special. In order for Lanterns to reach the heights I hope it can, the number one thing that they absolutely need to knock out of the park is Hal and Jon, and with each new scene we get with them both, I absolutely love the dynamic between the two, where we have the reluctant mentor and the hotshot rookie. And hotshot I think might be a little harsh of a word to describe Jon, but it is clearly demonstrated in all of these trailers that he knows he is capable of more and is itching to get that ring off of Hal. Whether or not he is truly ready for the responsibility, we will have to wait and see, but I do like the relationship between the two characters so far. Just having them be a happy and perfect duo who hits it off the first time they meet would have been boring. I like that there is some friction there, and I'm very curious to see how that relationship evolves as the show goes on, whether they grow closer and become a true duo, or whether or not they may even grow further apart, as Hal perhaps fears he is going to be replaced and starts becoming something else entirely. Do not worry, we will talk more about that in a little bit. Another thing that continues to be a standout within all of these trailers is the fact that I do truly think they knocked these castings for both characters out of the park. When it comes to Kyle Chandler as Hal Jordan, I 100% understand the criticism that fans have towards the decision to age up Hal and presumably only have him around in the DCU for one project, at least in the short term. Not to beat a dead horse, but I also think it was an incredibly odd and flawed decision to make the most popular Green Lantern and one of DC's most beloved characters and age him up in a way where most people would be shocked to see him in a second project. I totally understand wanting to shine a spotlight on John Stewart and wanting to give him the opportunity to be the face of the Green Lantern Corps in the DCU. John is a phenomenal character, and I know there are a lot of people my age specifically who grew up watching things like Justice League and Justice League Unlimited who have John as their favorite Green Lantern, and that's completely understandable because when done right, John is fucking awesome, but I do not understand why you had to potentially take Hal out of the picture to put a spotlight on John. Both of them should have been propped up together and been two massive pillars for not only the Green Lantern corner of the universe, but the DCU in general for years to come. However, that is enough dwelling on what could have been. Let's focus back in on the Hal and Jon we have, and I love what both have showcased so far. For an older Hal, I think Kyle Chandler is just perfect, not only in terms of his overall look, but also just how Kyle Chandler is as an actor and how he plays the character. Yes, I know he does come off as a bit of a hard ass and just in general kind of an asshole at times within these trailers, but Chandler just has far too much charisma to not come off as likable, and one of the main missions of the show clearly seems to be showcasing how Hal mentored Jon and how that mentorship sets up Jon to be the main Lantern of the DCU going forward, and I truly do not know if they could have picked anyone better for the role than Coach Taylor himself. I understand I do have a heavy bias for Chandler, as I have loved his work in things like Friday Night Lights as well as Bloodline, and I'm sure there are plenty of you who may have hated everything that we've seen from Chandler so far, especially with all of the F-bombs and more negative attitude, but I am simply fully bought in on this version of the character, and if this season turns out to be all that we get from Kyle Chandler in the role, I think that'll be pretty sad to see, as I do think if the show is anywhere near the quality I believe it can be, people are going to be really sad to see Kyle Chandler go. Even with all of the extremely fair criticism of aging up Hal and the skepticism some people have about Hal's use in the DCU, I really do think when Lantern Season 1 is complete, people are going to look back and realize that they may have overreacted to Chandler's casting. I think Hal is going to be an absolute fan favorite character, and people will be really wishing that they got to see more of Kyle Chandler in the role. When it comes to Aaron Pierre as Jon, I'm sure people are sick of me glazing this casting, but it's still an A+ for me. I do feel that Hal has definitely got a bit more of the love in these trailers, as he's gotten more of the cool action and good one-liners, whereas Jon, it definitely has a bit more of laying the groundwork for the character by showcasing his past, his home life, and of course putting him in opposition of a fan favorite character like Hal, which has also put him on the receiving end of Hal's wrath a lot of the time. But there's been nothing to knock me off of my A+ grading for this casting. I think Pierre is blossoming into a huge star, and by this time next year, where he will have already appeared in things like Lanterns, Star Wars, and Man of Tomorrow, he will be inching closer and closer to becoming a true household name and a true star that the DCU will be really glad they casted before he really broke out. I've really enjoyed what we've seen so far from Jon, and I think as we see more, it's only going to become more clear that Aaron Pierre was the perfect choice for the role. Now, even though I love getting to see more of Hal's training of Jon and further establishing the dynamic between both Jon and Hal, where as of now Jon is the backup if anything were to happen to Hal, and we also get to see more of this small Midwestern town where something clearly is afoot, and Hal once again mentions that he believes there is something alien in nature happening in relation to these deaths. But where the trailer and really my hype for Lanterns hits a whole new gear is as soon as we hear the word Manhunters. Of course, if you followed any of the quotes from showrunner Chris Mundy, it was very clear that there would be a lot more cosmic influence in the show eventually, but to finally have that voiced in the trailer itself is just so exciting, and I think including the Manhunters is a really smart idea. Not only are the Manhunters extremely formidable foes that can challenge even the likes of Hal Jordan in combat with their immense strength and numbers, but it's a villain that also ties back to the origins of the Green Lantern Corps and provides a lot of information on the Guardians as well. Through the Manhunters and the mystery of the Manhunters, which I'm sure will be explained in chunks over the entirety of the first season, it becomes very easy to also provide lots of crucial information about the origin of the Green Lantern Corps, which I really think is important for this show to do. For characters like Superman and Batman, there is no need to touch back on the origin of the character as it's already so ingrained in our minds. But for general audiences, they have no clue about who the Guardians are, why the Green Lantern Corps was formed, and I just think choosing the Manhunters as potentially the big bad for Lanterns is a really wise choice. Now, as of right now, I am willing to say I am not at all convinced that they will end up being the big bads, because I think the show is probably going in another direction, but I do really love that the Manhunters are going to be included, and I cannot wait to see how they look in live action. I will say I don't love the whole shape-shifting element of the Manhunters, as I kind of just like their normal robotic appearance. I understand there have been versions of the Manhunters in the comics that have been able to very much alter their appearance, but it feels like they could have just done something like the White Martians if they wanted to put an emphasis on something like shape-shifting. Maybe the trailer is faking us out and there are Manhunters as well as White Martians. Of course, I don't actually believe that to be the case, but I do honestly think the trailer could have been faking us out a little bit by presenting the shape-shifting right after name-dropping Manhunters, because in the trailer it definitely looks like the actual character we do see shape-shifting is a Guardian, most likely played by Laura Linney, who has been confirmed to be a Guardian in the series. But again, I could just be wanting to confirm my own bias because I don't want to see the Manhunter shape-shifting, but regardless of what their full power set is, I am immensely excited to see the Manhunters. However, I do not think that's who's going to be the main villain of Lanterns. Instead, I do think it's going to be Hal Jordan becoming Parallax. Now, of course, I could be wrong, and like I have said in past videos, I'm not entirely sure this is where I want the show to go, as I think something like Hal becoming Parallax is a story that would be much more rewarding over the span of at least 2 seasons of television, so that the audience could become more emotionally attached to not only Hal, but also other Lanterns characters that may stand in Parallax's way. But just based on the trailer and a quote from Chandler where he stated that the Guardians are concerned about what Hal may have inherited from Sinestro, I'm starting to feel like Parallax could be on the horizon. Now, I do want to say the quote from Chandler spread across the internet like wildfire, but I do think it was taken a little out of context, as the full quote definitely reads a bit more like the Guardians may be worried that Hal could have adopted some of Sinestro's more dangerous character traits, like not being afraid to take things a bit too far and potentially attempting a coup of his own, similar to what Sinestro has already done previously in the DCU, hence why he was kicked out of the Corps and currently in prison. But I understand why so many immediately jump to the idea of Parallax and how perhaps Sinestro could be aiming to manipulate Hal so that Parallax can grab a stronger hold on him. In the trailer, it definitely seems like Sinestro is attempting to pit not only Hal against Jon, but also perhaps the Guardians, who specifically chose Jon to be Hal's replacement. That fear of perhaps losing his ring and power could definitely be something that allows Parallax to take a stronger hold of Hal, and when just thinking about Hal's place in the broader story of the DCU, doing something like Parallax that leads into a potential rebirth of the character down the line always felt like a way for the DCU to basically have its cake and eat it too. If you were to go the route of Parallax as well as Rebirth, that is one scenario where you can have a story about an older Hal Jordan basically handing the reins to Jon, setting him up to be the main Lantern of the DCU for a while, and then eventually recast Hal and bring him back so that he could be a mainstay for years to come alongside Jon. Now, I do think it is a bit ridiculous to really be having this conversation right now, as maybe Parallax isn't a part of the show and Hal just dies at the hands of the Manhunters, as well as if they were to do something like Rebirth, it would most likely be several years down the line, and who knows if James Gunn, Peter Safran, and just the DCU in general, regardless of who's actually running it, will still be around. We might be talking about a rebooted DC universe in a couple of years run by a completely new company. So I think it's ridiculous to start talking about a project and a revival of a character that probably is not happening until the 2030s, as well as the fact that he could also be Parallax and maybe they just simply have no plans to ever bring Hal back. This conversation definitely is something that should be saved for after Lantern Season 1, where we actually know what happens and whether or not something like Rebirth is even on the table. But I can't lie, the idea is starting to become much more compelling to me. I still don't love the idea of turning Hal bad in one season, but as we know, a Lantern Season 2 does seem to be in development for now, probably dependent on the success of Season 1. But say the Manhunters serve as the main villain of Season 1, and you set up a Parallax story for Season 2, now that's something that could be pretty damn awesome, but that is just me wish casting for something that I do think would work better story-wise. I am currently predicting Parallax to play a very large role in Season 1 of Lanterns, and it'll most likely lead to the demise of Kyle Chandler's Hal Jordan, making way for Jon to be the DCU's Green Lantern going forward. We just gotta hope Rebirth is also a part of the plans for the future, if that's how Season 1 does play out. Another major win for this trailer is the fact that the suit doesn't look like absolute shit anymore. There is more green, and maybe it's just the specific angles we see, but it also feels a bit less bulky, but I do think that part could just be my eyes deceiving me a little bit. I truly think it's exciting that we are seeing the green actually pop in some of these shots, especially compared to the last trailer where I openly hated on the suit, and in my mind it was one of the worst live action comic book suits of all time. To be clear, just actually seeing some more green and just overall seeing it in a bit more action as well as better lighting does not vault this into like a top 10 suit of all time or anything like that, but it certainly feels much more authentic to Green Lantern, which has one of the most iconic designs in all of comics. And it's just crazy to me that in both live action adaptations that we have gotten for the character so far, we are nowhere close to just adapting the iconic look for the character that is so damn sleek and eye-popping. The suit we see in the trailer still leans a little too Earth 1 for me, and I certainly hope the suit that Jon gets eventually, probably by the end of this series, or at least in Man of Tomorrow, is even better and more like a traditional comic Green Lantern suit. But what we saw from Hal's suit in this trailer is still a step in the right direction. Also, another big win is the design of Ulrich Thompson's Sinestro. Holy fuck does he look awesome. It genuinely looks like someone took a panel of Sinestro right from a comic book page and threw it in front of the camera. I'm sure some people will bitch about the shade of pink. I'm just talking about the actual look. Yes, sure, it could definitely be a bit more bright pink, but I think Ulrich Thompson looks absolutely phenomenal in the role, and I cannot wait to see more of Sinestro. I'm really hoping he has more than just one scene where Hal goes to talk to him as he is imprisoned on Oa most likely. We know flashbacks will be a part of this show, and I would love to potentially see some flashbacks where they get to add more depth to Sinestro and Hal's relationship, whether that is maybe the coup that Sinestro attempts or just a flashback to Sinestro mentoring a younger Hal Jordan. Their relationship is truly one of the best in all of DC Comics, and it would be sad to only get a scene or two with both of them. One of my concerns that was absolutely shattered with this trailer was the idea that because this was on TV, visually this would not be grand enough in scale to be truly worth the name of Green Lantern, and goddamn was I wrong, because there are some absolutely breathtaking constructs as well as planets and other locations that are just so impressive. The alien planets look phenomenal, just the overall design and the way the show is shot looks great. Aaron Pierre mentioned that roughly 20% of the show was shot on the WB lot and the rest was shot traveling, and I do think based on what we have seen so far, that does come through. I do wish there was a bit more color. It does seem a little bit more like gray as well as like orangey. I don't know if that's because of the desert vibe, but I do think just overall like the CGI and just the way things are shot still does look phenomenal, even though I don't like the color filter really that is put on top of it. Now, it's very well possible they could also be saving some more of the rough shots for the show, as they may not want to present them in trailers, but I do really enjoy that this trailer did step out of that small town a bit more and showcase some things beyond Earth. I'm sure almost 80% of the show will still end up taking place on Earth, and I understand to many that may be way too much, and I honestly agree, but at least the cosmic stuff that we do see looks quite awesome. The tornado construct was absolutely spectacular, and I cannot wait to see what other cool constructs they have yet to show off off in the trailers and are saving for the show itself. Another standout moment of the trailer was just the voiceover of Hal reciting the oath. I don't know how something so simple can get me so excited, most likely because Green Lantern has been dragged through the mud by general audiences and even DC at times over the last decade and a half, but regardless, it was awesome. Listen, I totally understand there's a really good chance I am setting myself up for failure when it comes to Lanterns, because honestly, my hopes and expectations are probably way too high for this series. The last time I was this excited for a DC project was The Batman, and in no way, shape, or form am I trying to say I expect this to be as good as The Batman, but damn, wouldn't it just be awesome if DC really knocked a non-Batman related project out of the fucking park? Now, some people would probably argue that the DCU already did that with Superman, and I really enjoyed Superman, and I think it was a very good movie that is still like an 8-ish out of 10 a year later, but I'm talking about like a 9 out of 10 or better, and just an absolute home run. I truly think Lanterns can be that type of project if the show's quality is anywhere near what we have gotten from the trailers so far. Don't get me wrong, I still have my concerns about the show. For example, if this is truly all we get from Kyle Chandler's Hal Jordan, which I definitely think is possible, will he get the love and care he deserves, where at the end of the series, if he is gone, we are upset because we desperately want to see more of this version of the character, not because they botched him and basically just used him to put John over. Can they give John a compelling story where he truly steps into his own and is cemented as the DCU's Green Lantern going forward, not only in his potential own franchise, but also as the Green Lantern of the Justice League alongside the likes of David Corn Sweat's Superman? Also, even though I think this trailer does a great job showcasing us that even though there will be some more grounded elements to the show, there is going to be plenty of spectacle and comic aspects, but do they strike the right balance? It's very well possible what we see from the trailers could be about all we get off of Earth, and maybe it truly ends up being not enough. That's of course not even mentioning just flat out, are the characters compelling and is the writing good? Of course, these are questions we truly have no answers to yet, so I understand why some people still are very skeptical about the project, and due to the more unique tone, I also understand why some people may not love what we have seen so far, but I truly do think based on what we have seen, Lanterns has the potential to be quite special, and I cannot wait for the show to premiere next month. I'm counting down the days. However, now I want to know, what did you think of the new trailer for Lanterns? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all in another video.